Chapter 8, Part 1 of the Voyage of the Beagle. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by MCY. The Voyage of the Beagle by Charles Darwin. Chapter 8. Banda Oriental, in Patagonia. Excursion to Colonia del Sacramento. Value of an estancia. Cattle how counted. Singular breed of oxen. Perforated pebbles. Shepherd dogs. Horses broken in. Gauchos riding. Character of inhabitants. Rio Plata. Flocks of butterflies. Aeronaut spiders. Phosphorescence of the sea. Port Desire. Guanaco. Port St. Julian. Geology of Patagonia. Fossil gigantic animal. Types of organization constant. Change in the zoology of America. Causes of extinction. Having been delayed for nearly a fortnight in the city, I was glad to escape on board a packet bound for Montevideo. A town in a state of blockade must always be a disagreeable place of residence. In this case, moreover, there were constant apprehensions from robbers within. The sentinels were the worst of all, for from their office and from having arms in their hands, they robbed with a degree of authority which other men could not imitate. Our passage was a very long and tedious one. The Plata looks like a noble estuary on the map, but it is in truth a poor affair. A wide expanse of muddy water has neither grandeur nor beauty. At one time of the day, the two shores, both of which are extremely low, could just be distinguished from the deck. On arriving at Montevideo, I found that the Beagle would not sail for some time, so I prepared for a short excursion in this part of Banda Oriental. Everything which I have said about the country near Maldonado is applicable to Montevideo, but the land, with the one exception of the Grey Mount, 550 feet high, from which it takes its name, is far more level. Very little of the undulating grassy plain is enclosed, but near the town there are a few hedge banks, covered with agaves, cacti, and fennel. November 14th. We left Montevideo in the afternoon. I intended to proceed to Colonia del Sacramento, situated on the northern bank of the Plata and opposite to Buenos Aires, and thence, following up the Uruguay, to the village of Mercedes on the Rio Negro, one of the many rivers of this name in South America, and from this point return direct to Montevideo. We slept at the house of my guide at Canelones. In the morning we rose early, in the hopes of being able to ride a good distance, but it was a vain attempt, for all the rivers were flooded. We passed in boats the streams of Canelones, Santa Lucia, and San Jose, and thus lost much time. On a former excursion across the Lucia, near its mouth, and I was surprised to observe how easily our horses, although not used to swim, passed over a width of at least 600 yards. On mentioning this at Montevideo, I was told that a vessel containing some mountebanks and their horses, being wrecked in the Plata, one horse swam 7 miles to the shore. In the course of the day I was amused by the dexterity with which a gaucho forced a restive horse to swim a river. He stripped off his clothes, and jumping on its back, rode into the water till it was out of its depth. Then slipping off over the crupper, he caught hold of the tail, and as often as the horse turned round, the man frightened it back by splashing water into its face. As soon as the horse touched the bottom on the other side, the man pulled himself on and was firmly seated, bridle in hand, before the horse gained the bank. A naked man on a naked horse is a fine spectacle. I had no idea how well the two animals suited each other. The tail of a horse is a very useful appendage. I have passed a river in a boat with 4 people in it, which was ferried across in the same way as the gaucho. If a man and horse have to cross a broad river, the best plan is for the man to catch hold of the pommel or mane, and help himself with the other arm. We slept and stayed the following day at the post of Cufre. In the evening the postman or letter carrier arrived. He was a day after his time, owing to the Rio Rosario being flooded. It would not, however, be of much consequence, for although he had passed through some of the principal towns in Banda Oriental, his luggage consisted of 2 letters. The view from the house was pleasing. an undulating green surface with distant glimpses of the Plata. I find that I look at this province with very different eyes from what I did upon my first arrival. A recollect I then thought it singularly level, but now, after galloping over the pampas, my only surprise is what could have induced me ever to call it level. The country is a series of undulations, in themselves perhaps not absolutely great, but, as compared to the plain of Santa Fe, real mountains. From these inequalities there is an abundance of small rivulets, and the turf is green and luxuriant. November 17th. We crossed the Rosario, which was deep and rapid, and passing the village of Coya, arrived at midday at Colonia del Sacramento. The distance is 20 leagues, through a country covered with fine grass, but poorly stocked with cattle or inhabitants. I was invited to sleep at Colonia, and to accompany on the following day a gentleman to his estancia, where there were some limestone rocks. The town is built on a stony promontory, something in the same manner as at Montevideo. It is strongly fortified, but both fortifications and town suffered much in the Brazilian War. It is very ancient, and the irregularity of the streets and the surrounding groves of old orange and peach trees gave it a pretty appearance. The church is a curious ruin. It was used as a powder magazine, and was struck by lightning in one of the 10,000 thunderstorms of the Rio Plata. 2/3 of the building were blown away to the very foundation, and the rest stands a shattered and curious monument of the united powers of lightning and gunpowder. In the evening I wandered about the half-demolished walls of the town. It was the chief seat of the Brazilian War, a war most injurious to this country, not so much in its immediate effects as in being the origin of a multitude of generals and all other grades of officers. More generals are numbered, but not paid, in the United Provinces of La Plata than in the United Kingdom of Great Britain. These gentlemen have learned to like power, and do not object to a little skirmishing. Hence there are many always on the watch to create disturbance and to overturn a government which as yet has never rested on any stable foundation. I noticed, however, both here and in other places, a very general interest in the ensuing election for the President, and this appears a good sign for the prosperity of this little country. The inhabitants do not require much education in their representatives. I heard some men discussing the merits of those for Colonia, and it was said that, although they were not men of business, they could all sign their names. With this, they seemed to think every reasonable man ought to be satisfied. 18th. Rode with my host to his estancia at the Arroyo de San Juan. In the evening we took a ride round the state. It contained 2 square leagues and a half, and was situated in what is called a rincon; that is, one side was fronted by the Plata, and the 2 others guarded by impassable brooks. There was an excellent port for little vessels, and an abundance of small wood, which is valuable as supplying fuel to Buenos Aires. I was curious to know the value of so complete an estancia. Of cattle there were 3,000, and it would well support 3 or 4 times that number; of mares 800, together with 150 broken-in horses, and 600 sheep. There was plenty of water and limestone, a rough house, excellent corrals, and a peach orchard. For all these he had been offered 2,000 pounds, and he only wanted 500 pounds additional, and probably would sell it for less. The chief trouble with an estancia is driving the cattle twice a week to a central spot, in order to make them tame, and to count them. This latter operation would be thought difficult, where there are 10 or 15,000 head together. It is managed on the principle that the cattle invariably divide themselves into little troops of from 40 to 100. Each troop is recognized by a few peculiarly marked animals, and its number is known, so that one being lost out of 10,000, it is perceived by its absence for one of the tropillas. During a stormy night the cattle all mingle together, but the next morning the tropillas separate as before, so that each animal must know its fellow out of 10,000 others. On 2 occasions I met with in this province some oxen of a very curious breed, called Nata or Niata. They appear externally to hold nearly the same relation to other cattle, which bull or pug dogs do to other dogs. Their forehead is very short and broad,